I look at the formulas that they say that you should put into it and what I should be taking home from a take-home pay, I make less than probably should, because I want to have the people around me who are more talented than me in those areas. Not only do I think that makes the business better, but honestly, just quality of life, man. I've surrounded myself with people that have been awesome. When people go, well, how do you create so much content? Well, I work hard and I do put in the work, but I also have a team around me that help me do those things.
What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to another powerful episode of the Creative Journal podcast. I am your host, Andy of MMG Design, and I am so stoked and excited to be bringing you entry number 56 of the Creative Journal podcast. And today's guest is the one and the only Mr. Kirby Hasseman. Kirby is an author, podcaster, and the owner of Hasseman Marketing in Coshocton, Ohio. And apart from those arbitrary titles, he's just an overall super incredible person. I consider Kirby a role model of mine because he's very much someone that pushes himself in all aspects of life. We touch on his fitness journey, everything that's motivating him nowadays, the areas of business he's excited to pursue, and there's a lot to learn. So expect to learn from Kirby in this episode. Intentional rest, our approaches to sales, doing the uncomfortable in business, the correlation between fitness and marketing. Spoiler alert, there is a lot. How you should approach goal setting, building a team, and much, much more. Special thanks to Kirby for coming onto the show today. And you're going to leave this episode without the shadow of a doubt with at least one actionable and inspirational tip that you can add to your mindset today to grow your business and grow your life. So without further ado, please welcome the one and only Mr. Kirby Hasseman to the Creative Journal. Whether it's like making sales calls or something that's objectively not fun, like working out for a lot of people, it's like you're so much on a better trajectory if you can try and find a way to enjoy it rather than find a way to just keep doing it and just like white knuckle plow your way through it.
Right.
It more so looks like kind of like beating around the bush a little bit, and it's like Ali Abdallah has this really good thing where he says it's like, what would this look like if it were fun? So I already have that like duct taped on my laptop right now, because I'll like get up in the morning and I'll see that and I'm like, okay, like maybe this thing that I'm doing, maybe I have a little bit of anxiety about getting started with work, and you always want to start with the hardest thing.
Mm-hmm.
So if I can see that when I first get started, and it's much the same with fitness too, dude.
Like, totally. There's so much overlap.
I know.
So much overlap.
Yeah. And that's what I see is like all the most disciplined people, all the people that have kind of that internal locus of control are doing something that's like really physically hard. And there's something to doing something for the sake of it being hard. I don't know what it is.
Well, I think it builds up that if I can do this, then I can do this, right? Like I've lost about 25 pounds in the last, I don't know,
good for you, man.
2 or 3 months. Thank you. But it really does translate into, well, if I can do that, then I can make more sales calls. Like, because I'm a person who does things that other people won't do. And so if I'm a person who does things that other people won't do, most people won't make this many sales calls. Well, I do things that other people won't do. So it kind of shifts your identity a little bit. I think back to my dad, when I was young. I tell this story all the time. I was, kind of an only child at this point, and he was like, "All right, we got to move. Your mom wants to move the furniture around in the living room," and he's like, "Come help me." And I was like puffing up my chest because I was like 9 years old, and all of a sudden he needs my help. And he immediately goes this heavy couch, and I was like, "Really, Dad? We got to start here?" And he's like, "Always lift the heavy stuff first. After that, everything else seems lighter." And I mean, it's one of those things that's like, well, that's true in every area. Right. If the thing you're not wanting to do, you do that first, the rest of your day, you've already knocked the hardest thing off. And so I think there really is the whole do hard shit. It translates here, and then it makes you feel like you can do things in other areas of your life too.
Yeah. And I don't know about you too, but first of all, I love that, but I don't know about you too, but like I always get like I always feel the most not confident because like I have a lot of insecurities about like working out and stuff, but like you always feel like afterwards I'm just like so excited to get back to work. There's something about it that just puts you in that state where maybe you listen to a good audiobook, you're listening to something informative. I listen to a lot of Hormozy. I know you do too.
Yeah.
And it's just like yeah, I can make these connections a little bit, and I get ideas for content, and I feel like that never happens when I'm like stationary, sitting, staring at a screen.
Yeah.
I think there's something to be said for generating ideas and getting out of that state. So
well, there's science behind it too, right? So there's a great book called Brain Rules by Dr. John Medina, I think. It's called Brain Rules, and I think it's rule number one or number two, but exercise makes you smarter. And the way, and he's one of those brilliant guys that can take something really complex and make it simple. But he said, essentially, and I think it's about 20 minutes of exercise. Essentially, your brain is fed by blood vessels, and the blood vessels he compares to highways or roads. He said, just like any other highway or road, ultimately you'll get over time, if there's not maintenance, you'll get potholes and you'll get cracked roads, and they won't deliver as well. Well, exercise does two things. Number one, it paves the roads, right? So it makes the roads that are delivering the blood to your brain better. But the cool thing is it creates new roads. It creates new blood vessels while you're doing it. So very scientifically, when you do exercise, it makes you smarter, which is why the best way to multitask, right? Is if you're putting good stuff in your brain while you're doing the paving of the roads. That's where you come up with all these cool ideas. Like I was listening to, I think it was Ed Milet this morning, and it's like, I tend to listen to them for about half my run, and then I hit pause and just think about it. Because that now it's like I've got time to kind of put my own toppings on the sundae, if that makes sense.
That's a really good idea. Yeah, I like that a lot. And I mean, that makes sense too. And I think if you can create that cue around like, okay, I'm in a bit of a roadblock. That's what I'm trying to get better at, is like, because I'll have moments where I have like low self-esteem, or it's like recognizing the moments when you're not at your breaking point, where you're just feeling like psychological discomfort, like I don't want to be doing this anymore.
Yeah.
You kind of recognize that as the cue of leaning into it, or like generating like a shift change, or a position change. Like I don't know if you listen to Huberman, but he has a couple good ones about, and I don't listen to it as often anymore, but he said this thing, it was like trying to think your way out of a thought problem is like trying to sniff your way out of a cocaine addiction. So like generating like a different environment, physically changing your position is like what generates some of the best ideas. So it's good to see that, it's real.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. But let's talk about and we could waffle on all day about
whatever you want,
stuff
man.
we like.
I'm in.
But I want to give you a platform to tell your story a little bit. I know you've been doing Hasseman Communications for like 15, 20 years going
20
on.
years in November, yeah.
Wow. So that's a lot to unpack in itself. Then you have the book, you have all your content, you have, first of all, you're one of the most consistent people with content that, especially in our area and industry, that I know. So that's what drew me to you for sure. But just take me through the whole gamut. I guess start as early as you'd like, but I'd like to get to know.
Yeah. So thanks, man. And again, I love that we've connected. I always enjoy our chats. I think that the term entrepreneur wasn't really thrown around when I was a kid, but I think I was an entrepreneur kind of at birth. My grandpa was an entrepreneur. I started my first business when I was about 8 or 9 years old, and it was a bike repair business. And me and a partner started this bike repair business. And you got to understand, pre-Facebook, there was no no way to just post and try and get some business. And so I knew right away. Again, I'm not sure I knew this at 8 or 9, but right away I was like, oh, I'm just go get customers. And so I went and literally first day got a customer, got a bike to repair. And then I realized something really important once I brought it back to my garage. And that's, I don't know how to fix bikes at all. I still don't, right?
Quickly
pivoted to a bike washing business, So I think a couple lessons from that is number one, I knew I could go get customers. I liked talking to people. I enjoyed sales even at a really young age. And number two, you can't be full of crap. You actually have to deliver on your promises. And so, you fast forward to when we decided to start Hasseman Marketing. My wife was in the industry. We sold branded merchandise for years, and then we did it for somebody else. And then, got to a point where as we were doing that for somebody else, people kept coming to us and saying, hey, can you do video for us? Because that was sort of my background. I was at the Longaberger Company for a while. And I kept saying no, because I didn't have the equipment. And after about the sixth person asked me in 1 year, I was just like, okay, wait a second. I'm being dumb here. I'm turning, one of my rules of business is never get in the way of somebody trying to give you money. Right. And so I finally said, okay. And it was a friend of mine, somebody who knew me and trusted me at the time. And I said, okay, I will agree to do this project, but I'm gonna have to bill you up front. And I need you to pay me up front. He's like, okay, why? And I said, well, I'm going to go out and buy all the equipment, and then I'm going to do this. And, from the lesson from that early age is I got that equipment, I got all the stuff, and then I wildly over delivered on that person's video. And, so they were, they told everybody that I did a good job for them. And that's sort of where Hasseman Marketing started, sort of at its core. And so since then, we've been in business. We'll be at 20 years in November. We have, in that business, Hasseman Marketing is a big piece of branded. We do digital marketing. We do branded merch, still a big piece of what we do, probably 80%. We bought a sign shop, and we have a company called Simple Signs and Print, which is a separate company. And then my wife and I own a real estate sort of investment company called Hasseman Properties, where we have sort of midterm rentals. We just bought a motel. And so that my wife runs that, but you know how it is with a family business. I'm working and helping in that business as well. And so we're at one point we had a brewery. What I realized is a really interesting business, but not a lifestyle I wanted. And so we opted to close that. And with each of these, I think the key is that you win some and you learn some, right? And so there's some things that have worked out really well. We've maintained business for this amount of time, but there's a lot of stuff I've gotten wrong, and those tend to be the places you learn the most.
Yeah, I know. We talked about that a little bit, last time too. Most of our chats so far have mostly been around sales, but like the concept of experience and not failure. So like you have, what your ideal result looks like, or you should have some kind of an idea of what it feels like, and then the process of getting there is just the failures. So it's a sign that you're on the right track. And it's so against our instinct to view it like that. But what are some of the fails or the failures, the experiences that you're the most grateful for, and what did you take away from them?
That's great. I think the it would be difficult to enumerate all of the failures, right? But I think there's a million of when you first get into sales, you overpromise, or you don't get the pricing right, or you do whatever that you chase away a sale. For me, the big thing that has shifted for me is exactly what you said, is really shifting the idea that a failure is just that. I mean, unless you're skydiving, then you can't really fail. But other than that, I think about the brewery, and I think in many people's eyes, they would look at it and say, well, that's, that was a failure because it didn't work out. And I certainly I could view it that way. And I if I'm being honest, once I decided to make the shift to shut it down, it was a really hard 3 days, mentally 3 days, because of the other people's opinions of it. Right. But once I got through that, then it was just like, okay, what did I learn from it? And I mean, really, truly, that was the mental shift. And I was like, oh, I would have named it differently. I would have done this. I can literally tell you all the things that I would do differently. And I don't want to start another brewery, but I still went through the mental exercise to say, okay, but if the opportunity comes up and this and this and this were aligned, how would I do it differently? Yeah. And I think in every situation, if you go in with that idea, to me, that was the biggest shift I made, is that everything is my fault. The book Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin is everything is my fault, even to the point where, if you get rear-ended in traffic, or you get like things that are clearly not your fault, If you go through and go, yeah, but what could I learn from it? What could I do differently?
Yes.
Many people won't do that because they think they're being a martyr, or they think that, they do not want to use the thumbs instead of the fingers, right? They want to blame other people, but you lose so many lessons. Even if you ultimately decide, no, I cannot think of anything I could have done differently. Okay, cool. But almost always there's something. And so when you don't look at it that way, I think you rob yourself of an opportunity to get better the next time.
Yeah, and it's also you said the ownership piece of it, but it's just that phrase, internal locus of control. So there's people that, and I grew up thinking like, and it takes exposure to talking to people like you, talking to other people, and just getting different feedbacks. Is like the way you perceive things is your reality. If you say like something that happens to you rather than you had any sort of control on the outcome, then I mean, you're just selling yourself short. Like you can either be right or you can make progress, and what feels better in the long term. And so I really love that. And another thing too, I want to touch on, so like, and I really I like how you framed it as being experienced and not fair, because it's like, once you start anything and you do anything, like there's, no matter what happens, like the lax way of putting it is that people can talk shit either way, if you start the brewery and it's a raving success, like, oh man, like a brewery, like, is that the best family option? And then like, if you sell it and fail, and you sell it and then you pursue something different, it's like, oh, well, that didn't last very long. Exactly. The same thing with, going freelance versus going to work in an agency. So a lot of the empowerment comes from just realizing that if you can separate how you act from, and I think a lot of us subconsciously just base our own decisions on what other people might say or think, and a lot of times it's like not even close at all. So like starting matter. Exactly, and it's like it's like that wasn't even close to what was going to happen or what they would say. And one of my biggest reservations that relates to that was like starting, because dude, like no one else that I know that I grew up with high school is freelancing or trying to start their own business, and I'm very blessed to be in a position where I have saved enough to kind of have a runway to make this happen, or and go all in on it. And there's a lot of like mental dilemma of like, okay, if everyone else is doing something different, like, am I doing the wrong thing? And then like my mother's family comes from a very well-to-do sort of neighborhood, and I've had this dilemma 1,000 times. Like, say one of her affluent sisters comes up and says, what's Andy up to? He just graduated. Surely he's working full-time somewhere and, on the good career path. What's you going to say? And that leads into a whole nother topic of like making sure your family knows what you do. Because if they don't, then you're just missing out on a lot of referrals. Learn that the hard way. Yeah. But that kind of tails off as like a lot of us, I think, base our own actions, even subconsciously, on what the feedback that may or may not even come from other people. Sure. So,
and I
see that a lot.
I think that's one of the reasons why surrounding yourself with people who aspire to be what you want to be is so important. I'm not going to attribute this right, but I heard it the other day that you want to surround yourself with people your dream day is their normal Tuesday, right? Mm-hmm. Like, and because again, then all of a sudden those things are normal. So when you are chasing something that's a little bit different, you're going to progress down a different road, even if your values are pretty similar. Sometimes people will see your progress as a threat. Right? Because if they are not progressing, if they're not developing, your friends from high school might be looking at what you're doing and going, oh, but you're going off on this weird path. And I think that people's progress, your progress will intimidate other people, and then they'll use perfection against you. Mm-hmm. Right. Like, and I think I want to attribute this. I think this was John Acuff it was either Acuff or Milet that I heard this from. And I thought it was great because he said, by you growing and listening and doing podcasts and doing this sort of thing, there will be people in your life and be like, who does this person think they are? And then you say, yeah, but you're not doing as good a job staying with your family, or, hey, you're not doing this. So in other words, they're taking perfection and throwing it against you. And that's a weapon they use because they're intimidated with your progress. And I think that that was a tough realization for me, because none of us are perfect, right? And so if we are battling against the perfect version of our family self or our business self or our money self or our fitness self, well, then we're always going to fall short, right? And so focusing and continuing to focus on just becoming a better version of our own self each day is the only way comparison works for us.
Dude, yeah, man, so good. And that's what I thought is like, there's that balance too, because we just came from talking about like doing hard things, and we're all capable of more. But then I think a good metric is, like you kind of said, comparing it to your past self, because you can always do more, just more than what you've done in the past, not like trying to live someone else's story and, like trying to all of a sudden maybe go run a marathon, if you're not like in that position. So it's good to, because like we all, and I know like all high performers feel this way, is all you hear is you could have done more.
Oh, sure.
And that little voice like at the end of like a workout or like a day's work, you can just take that so far. And that's good because it can teach you what you're capable of, but it's also not good because it's a distraction, and it's almost like an egocentric way of approaching it. And if you're just in competition with it can like totally make you focus on the unabstract and the things that don't actually matter. So it's like you reach a point where it's okay, I could over-index on this thing 100% just to prove to myself that I could, but is that most productive towards what my actual goals are? Is that what I'm actually trying to reach? So I think there's a balance between finding that point where you push yourself, but it's in service of the thing that you're trying to reach the most. Because I think that comes from a little bit of self-awareness too.
Yeah, and I tell you, I struggle with this, Andy. If you want to know the truth, like we've been talking of my sort of fitness goals, and I'm chasing something pretty hard, and it's been going great. But you know what I don't want to do right now? I don't want to take a rest day. And I know intellectually that often a legitimate rest day is where growth happens. But I'm doing well, and so I don't want to take that day off. And so I think sometimes it's counterintuitive when you're chasing any kind of goal. But the reality of it is taking a walk around the block, getting a good night's sleep, taking a weekend off gives your body a chance to recharge, your brain a chance to recharge. And I think doing that intentionally, and it's funny, I've been talking about this where sometimes we think a rest day is sitting on the couch and eating a bunch of Oreos. That's not an intentional rest day for me, because it does, as to your point, it moves me away from what I'm trying to accomplish. That being said, the same thing where I'm like, okay, I'm going to sit, but I'm going to read something, or I'm going to hang out with my family, and I'm going to go to bed at 8:00 or whatever, because I'm really going to rest. And then the next day coming at it, I think even being intentional in your rest allows you to perform better when you come off that rest day.
Yeah, and I heard your video on that either yesterday or today, I can't remember, but it should feel like, and I can tell you're one of those people where it's like, yeah, it has to feel hard somehow, and I'm the same way. It's like, if I'm doing the easy thing, if this is technically the lazy thing, then it's it can't be what's right. So I think it's a balance between doing what's hard and doing what's smart.
Yes,
and that's something we're all trying to like teeter on, because I also heard the thing that I think it was Chris Williamson said that like balance isn't something that actually exists in physics. It's actually the process of trying to go back and forth and find the middle. So true balance doesn't actually exist. And I also don't love the word balance because I think it looks different for everybody. Like it depends on what your goals are, what your capabilities are, and what you're trying to reach. And like eating 8,000 calories a day for a marathon athlete or an ultra athlete probably isn't as bad of an idea as it is for someone who's trying to be in a caloric deficit. Yeah, or me too. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's so hard. That's why like I said, like feedback is important. Engaging with other people, trying to find what other people are doing that excites you, what you take away from them.
And I'll tell you what,
without that, it's a frame of reference too.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No,
so for me, one of the big unlocks in this space is seasons. my wife and I, we had a season where our kids were a certain age, and that's just what we were doing, right? There was much less working out. There was much less, because we were going to 8th grade cheerleading. We were going to dance competitions. That was our season. And one of the things that I've done pretty well in my life is I've enjoyed the season, but it's also important to know that it's just a season. Right? Whenever anybody says to me, like, oh, when high school's over, the girls' high school's over, you're just going to miss going to all that stuff. I'm like, no, I'm not. It was great. I enjoyed it, but I'm not going to go to dance competitions anymore. A, that would be weird. But B, right? Like, that's not the season I'm in. The season I'm in right this minute is trying to get into better shape. And then it's like trying to live through those seasons and being smart about it and understanding that it doesn't have to be forever. At least gives me a little pause that I can run a little harder in the short term. And then hopefully vacation season is around the corner.
Yeah. No, I love that too. Cause it's like, you're making peace. It's that, and like an alignment portion, intentionality is a big thing. So if and I think it was, again, Chris Williamson said, like, know in advance what you're going to suck at and be okay with it.
Yes. So
if you have a season of life where fitness isn't your main thing, then, okay, I can put in, more hours at the office. I can really lean into, this time of my life where I can have the energy to dedicate towards this thing. It's just, I'm being intentional about how I use it. And even if it's something that can be deemed as productive, if it's not in service of that intention, then it's actually a distraction. So how do you kind of go about like prospecting what your big beast that you want to swallow is, like, or beast that you want to take down, or beforehand, and kind of create that intentionality? I know, like, last time we talked, you were really big on making your calls, being consistent. Like, you're really like pushing yourself, and that's what got me excited, and I've been motivated just since that ever since. But what's kind of creates that sense of what you're going to set your sights on, and then how do you dive all in on that thing?
Yeah, for me, I am a big goal setter, right? Like, and I've always been, like, since high school. I didn't really have a lot of friends who were like that, or at least not vocally like that. I've evolved to setting more quarterly goals or 12-week year goals. There's a great book, 12-week year.
Yeah. I'm reading that right now.
Yeah, and it speaks to me because I am a short attention span person. And so personally, I set 12-week year goals. And then we actually just started as a company about a year ago with the book Traction with Gino Wickman. And ironically, he sets 90-day rocks. So, and essentially it's 12-week year goals for the company. And so I say all that to say, I look at through the lens of the company, and I look through the lens of personal, and I set up what I think the most important things in my life are. Now, I tend to set goals based on the 5 F's. So almost everybody set goals on 2 of the F's. It's either finance or fitness, right? Everybody wants to have 6-pack abs and $1 million in the bank, right? But I think if you want to have a well-balanced life, you need well-balanced goals. And so mine are finance, fitness, family, faith, and fun. And so, yes, I actually do set fun goals. Now, often my family and fun goals will sometimes overlap, but not always. Golf trips with the guys might fall into that. And what I've found is that I get them up there on the board and I go, okay, I got 90 days to knock this off. That urgency really helps me focus. What we were talking about last time was about sales calls. Is for years the metric that we measured here at Hasseman Marketing was presentations. When we sent out presentations, ideas for our clients, we tended to get sales back, and that was a fun part of the business. But I felt like in recent months, recent quarters, those numbers were getting inflated without the substance behind it, and so we shifted to meetings. And so I changed. Okay, my focus is going to be on getting in front of clients face to face, which a lot of people aren't doing now, which gives me an opportunity to stand out. And the thing about it is, I was talking to the sales team, and they were kind of like, oh, I don't know if I can do this many. I don't know if I can do this many. And so my whole goal was to, all right, I'm going to run the company. I'm going to run this other company. I'm going to work on this other company. I'm going to lead I'm going to do the most meetings. Because if I do the most meetings, then A, sales will follow, which would be good. And then B, I can kind of knock down the walls of excuses, quite honestly, for everybody else in the building, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it only takes that one person to kind of. I mean, I had the example of the guy that broke the minute or the
Yeah, 4 minute mile.
4 minute mile, and then like
Yeah.
everyone started doing it. Like, it's literally that mental reframe of like, okay, wow, this guy works 16 hours a day. Like, is that possible? It's like, yeah, it's possible. You just have to do it.
Yeah.
And then once you
And
do,
it's
you
a
prove it.
season.
Right.
It's
Right.
not
And
forever.
right. And then once you prove it to yourself, it's just like, because we just default to our habits no matter what. Like, that's just the baseline, the homeostasis. Eat the same things, do the same workout in the gym. It's just, it takes spontaneity a little bit to kind of like jar yourself out of that. And also that intentionality, which, I mean, I love the concept of quarterly goals, the 90 days. I think that's a really good sort of sprint to really hold your attention long enough and also make some actual results. Because I've heard also that you can accomplish way less than you think you can in 5 years or in a week, but then like in 10 years you can go way further. So it's kind of that concept is like playing on both strings of that. But how specific and intentional are you when you're writing your goals? Are you more like input based goals or like output based goals? So if you're really leaning into sales, are you saying like, okay, I need to make this many calls, or are you saying I need to book this many appointments? Like, which one of those would be more accurate for what your goals are?
I love this question. So lead measures versus lag measures is what I call it.
Okay.
So the lag measure is the goal. So if I want to sell $10,000 in a week, so I want both, by the way, is the answer, Andy. So because I think ultimately you need to say, okay, I want to sell the $10,000. I want to sell the $100,000, whatever it is, because that's how you see if the lead measure is working. The problem with the lag measure is that once you get on the scale, it's too late. Right? Like if I said I want to lose 10 pounds, I get on the scale. The great news is you either passed or you're failed, but there's nothing you can do about it then. A lead measure is the thing that you have complete control over, that you can do, that will lead you toward the goal. Right? So the 10 pounds is, okay, I'm going to run 3 miles a day. I'm going to eat 2,000 calories a day. I'm going to, those are things you can control. You don't need anybody else's permission. You can do it. From a sales perspective, that $100,000 goal, the lag goal, what you just heard about my 10 sales calls a day, which is what I set, that's my lead measure. I get to control that. I'm going to get in front of people. I'm going to see them. I'm going to drop off flyers. I'm going to get in front of them, and I'm going to control that number. And my hypothesis is, if I do that over and over again, the lag measure will take care of itself. And so I set both, if that makes sense. Now, in some areas, it's like, hey, I want to take a vacation with my family. I either booked the vacation or I didn't. But in those those harder goals, those things that take more, do hard stuff, discipline, I find that if I focus on these things, because these are the daily things, right? These are the things that I wake up in the morning and go, look, 10 sales calls a week's not that many. It's just 2 a day. So it's like, I can either try and do 10 in one day, or I can do 2 a day. But either way, I get there and I have control over it in today's, in the day. And then at the end, we'll see if I did the activities. And then after 90 days, I can reevaluate and go, oh, okay, so actually 10 wasn't enough, or I need to do better calls, or, did I get to the result that I wanted? But otherwise, I waited the whole 90 days and I only focused on that. Well, that's problematic, because the sales goal often is out of your control too, right? You can't control whether the prospect says yes or no. You can control whether you make the call. And so I try to have goals on both sides of that, for not only for the company, but for myself.
That's a really good way to kind of check both boxes, that you know what the output that you want is, but I think a lot of it just kind of makes for a more important goal setting process. Like, you have to know what the lead measures are that generate the lag measures that you're trying to get for. And you're going to be more intentional with setting those, because once you start, you're putting the ladder up on the wall. You're going to start scaling it. So it's really important to kind of have that framework right in the beginning. But I want to kind of zoom out a little bit and talk about, Kirby, like the business owner. Like, we know you have like the habits in place. You've very entrepreneurially minded. You kind of built this thing that's, yours. You've gone through the gamut of like hiring people and, scaling a team, dealing with finances. Like, what are some of the best habits or the things you can attribute the most to growing from where you were when you started?
Okay, that's a great question. So I'd say number one is just being willing to work. I think it's one of those where that is undervalued today because people are like, well, we got to get rid of hustle culture. And I think that there's a difference between valuing working 24 hours a day and not getting sleep. I'm always talking, we need to get rest. We need to exercise. We need to meditate. We need to take care of ourselves in order to take care of our customers. But the one thing you can control, the variable you can control is how hard you work. Like, so the idea, there's a dichotomy there that we need to understand, but we can't work hard if we don't take care of ourselves either. Right. So understanding that there's both sides of that, but you do have to work hard. And I think that one of the things I think my wife and I both pride ourselves on is people say, oh, they're hard workers. I'm not the smartest. I'm not the most talented, but I'll put in the time. So that's number one. Number two, I early on sacrificed personal profit for having a team. Don't get me wrong. Like, I want to make money. But as I look at the formulas that they say that you should put into it and what I should be taking home from a take home pay, I make less than probably should because I want to have the people around me who are more talented than me in those areas. Not only do I think that makes the business better, but honestly, just quality of life, man. Back to that, being able to get sleep and not stress and whatever. It's like I've surrounded myself with people that have been awesome. When people go, well, how do you create so much content? Well, I work hard and I do put in the work, but I also have a team around me that help me do those things, if that makes sense. And then I guess the third thing, I always like to do thing in threes. So work hard, surround yourself with people with the team, and then continually learning. I am constantly, if you're listening to this conversation, you've heard me reference books and podcasts. I'm constantly trying to get to be a better version of myself. I was actually at a golf outing recently, and I was looking around at people who were around my age that just, I think that I heard a quote one time that says a lot of people die at 25, but they don't get buried until they're 75. And that makes me sad. I'm in a better shape right now than I've been in 30 years. I want to be a better business owner and smarter entrepreneur at the end of 2024. I'm not done learning and growing. And I find that when I'm in that headspace where I'm setting goals, I'm pushing myself, I'm trying to elevate, man, I'm having a lot more fun too, So those are the three things I would say that just off the top.
Yeah, that's gold right there. And there's a lot to take away from that, just on both sides of it is like and I totally agree with the second one, the team aspect of it is like, there's a balance between, because you can work as hard as you want by yourself, and it's like sharing with other people is really important, even if it's just talking about it. So I think you can totally crank a solo job depending on what industry you're in, what's most fit for your type of business and how you like to work, but just sharing it with other people, because at the end of the day, like if you don't vocalize some of the stuff, and that's what the value of like networking, referral groups, where you're forced to be very succinct and clear about the day-to-day of your business, what you offer, how it helps people, so you can just like make it real, like in your own head. Like I know the first networking event I went to, I had to give the 25-minute introductory presentation. I was like, well, it's the first time I've ever done something like that. So I was like, okay, this is it really forced me to make it practical, make it real. Like this is how what you do helps other people. And you start to get feedback on what other people think and how you can improve. And just make it, sharing with other people, just getting that feedback, whether it's with members of a team or just people that are other business owners, just makes it real. Because you can kind of waffle on in your own head about that. But yeah, what are some of the, and there's a lot of different directions I want to take. I want to be mindful of your time too. But what are some things that maybe are contrarian, that you believe in, that maybe are an unpopular opinion, or maybe you've gotten flack for in the past, whether it's your kind of approach to business or marketing or entrepreneurship? that you've seen work for you, and that you maybe not would die on a hill for, but are very confident in?
Yeah, I honestly, the first one is the work hard thing. I think in our culture we tend to swing too hard. We go this way and then this way, and I do think that one of them is no. You still need to work hard. You still have to do that. That being said, I'd say the second one is the difference between scarcity and abundance mindset. I see so many small businesses stepping over dollars to pick up quarters because they're so concerned that their competitor might get this piece of the business or this piece of the business. When you understand that there's so much business out there, and if we're doing it the right way, that we don't have to worry so much about the competitor. We need to worry about serving the client. And if we do that over and over again and do that well, the business will take care of itself. It's a longer term play. It's an abundance mindset, but I do find that is true. And every time I see the opposite, I'm always just like, oh, I can't stand it. It's one of the reasons, and this is, I suppose this would be the unpopular opinion, I don't like non-competes. As an entrepreneur, you might think that's a little weird, but I don't like it. If you don't want to work for me, I don't want you here. I want to treat you well enough and train you well enough that you want to be here, but I'm not a fan. And then the final thought of this is just give first. I think so many times we get into business and we're like, you need to get paid for every single thing you do. Yes, you want to be paid fairly for the work that you do, but I think that those who provide value up front are the ones who build integrity and trust and suddenly become the high-priced option because people are willing to pay more for that person that's built a relationship with them, that's given them something over time. We were talking about things that you are looking at doing by looking at websites and telling people how they could improve their website. That's a risk, right? You're doing some work, you're spending some time, but I think that ultimately that's going to be like, people be like, wow, this guy took this amount of time when I wasn't paying him. Just think of what he will do once I actually put him under contract. So those would be the things that kind of come to mind.
Yeah. And I heard this is kind of an idea I'm toying with, but like, value up front without any reward unlocks compound interest. So an investment up front unlocks compound interest. So like if you can prove to someone we talked about like past examples of times we've been sold to, like how we look at different advertising and what it makes us feel and what made us buy and how we approach that like to our own kind of sales approach. And it's always the ones that make you feel like you bought and that you weren't sold to, if that makes sense. Yeah. So it's almost hard to kind of be like a post hoc analysis of it because you're just like, well, that guy wasn't selling to me. Like I made that choice, Right. And when you think back to it, it's always the things where you were just so convinced about where it's like, okay, I kind of felt like I was already getting the value from it and just paying it was just kind of a, just like a social currency of acceptance. Like that's something I would have done anyway. Like there was no friction I had to overcome there. So it's delivering that value. I'm huge on that too. So we definitely agree with that. Just delivering value up front. And that's hard too, because it's hard to quantify. Because you have the goals for the bottom line and the revenue and how much you want to bring each month. And, if you can't bill for it, then it makes it really hard to get the feedback that you're making progress, because a lot of it can fall on deaf ears for sure.
And I think it's a long-term play though, right? Like one of the things that I think people struggle with is that if I hit this button, then I need to get this back. Well, if you do it that way, then it's not giving, it's transactional.
Yeah.
Right. Like, so if you're going to do that sort of thing, like what we were talking about, is that you go, you look at people's website, you give it to them, you're just doing it truly out of the kindness of your heart. And that's the irony behind it, is that if you don't look for the return, you'll get greater returns. Right? Because we as humans have a really good BS meter, right? Because people have the rule of reciprocity is what this a rule of psychology, right? Is that in every culture, every religion, the rule of reciprocity exists. And it's simple. It just says, hey, if I do something nice for you, I feel compelled to do something nice for you back. Right? It's just, and it's great. I think all cultures being built on that is wonderful. But as is the case, business people and marketers sometimes ruin things. And so we think that if I did something nice for you, you're going to be like, okay, now you have to buy my thing. Now you have to get your website from me. Now you have to buy this pen from Kirby because he did something nice for you. And the moment you unlock it by saying, no, that was just for you. It's like, oh, this person's different. Now I want to do, you see what I'm saying? It's like by really truly giving without the expectation of return, that's when the returns and the outsized returns come.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it's another part of it too, just comes from there's a mindset behind that too, where it's like, okay, if you're going to give this to someone, I already know that it's going to be so much better than what they already have.
Right.
So it's by osmosis. It's like, okay, like if I'm improving their life in some way, then you can just, make a peace with that, and that's success.
Yeah. You're building your brand then. You know what I mean? Like you're building your brand. And the other thing I would say is so many times in sales, the answer is not no. The answer is not now. Right. And understanding that is kind of key too, that you are like, they're not turning you down. They're not whatever. This is just not the right time. And so by doing something, being kind, giving first, like all you're going to do is build your brand so that when the time is right, they're like, oh, I remember the time, and they come to you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so good, dude. Like, I'm trying to take notes here, but how one thing I want to touch on too, because I want to be mindful of your time, is your approach to content. Like, how has that evolved over the years? Because I'm not like, I want to totally disarm you. Like, I'm not calling you old, but you were around before this stuff like was really necessary and more mainstream.
Sure.
And you see, I was being serious, like, because like, dude, you're in better shape than a lot of people my age. So, but like, what's your approach to content like, and how do you? Because you started kind of in the beginning, you've been really consistent with for a long period of time. What have the rewards from that been like, and how have you created a system where it's not just a habit, but something that you like enjoy doing? Like, how do you find that overlap of the content maybe that you like to make versus what's maybe the most effective for the business versus putting out the right message? Like, what's your whole kind of approach to content in general?
Yeah, I think that's where content is, where the give first economy. I wrote a book called The Give First Economy, and that's where that came from. Is that when I first started the show, Delivering Marketing Joy, I mean, literally, so the way I did it was I would interview somebody, I'd give them 3 questions, and then I gave them the opportunity to ask me one question, because I wanted it to be more of a conversation. Now I've since dumped that because everybody, it got to a point where after 400 episodes, I've been asked every question I was going to be asked, right? But what I found was, at first, the question was always, what's the ROI on this? What's the ROI on you doing this interview show where you don't sell anything and you don't try to brand your company, right? And I remember it being a hard question for me to answer, because at the very beginning, there wasn't an ROI. It was, I would answer and be like, I don't know what it is. I just know it's the right thing to do as long as I keep going. Now, since then, a couple things have happened. Number one, the first thing that happened was, in our industry, and I'm sure this is true in websites and other things, is that people would call us on Monday and be like, hey man, I forgot I've got this event. I need some pens on Friday. And you'd be like, oh, those are the worst, because it's like everything's a rush. Shipping's a crazy. You got to, it's always stressful. Now, it's not that I don't get those anymore, but I get fewer of them because I get more calls where they say, hey, I've got an event coming up in 6 months. Let's talk together about what we're going to do. And all of a sudden, now I'm not just talking about pens. I'm talking about backdrops. We're talking about digital marketing, and it's more fun. We get to be more creative. And that's the biggest shift right away, was it put me at a different part in the line, right? Because they didn't view me as a salesperson. They viewed me as a marketing person. The big evolution, I heard this from Seth Godin. I want to give credit where credit is due. I've got his book sitting over here. And the unlock for me was, he said, there's a difference between brand marketing and direct marketing. Brand marketing is the Super Bowl ad. Brand marketing, like when Bud Light or Coca-Cola or whoever it is does a Super Bowl ad, they know people are going to be at a Super Bowl party, and they do not expect you to leave the party. They're not like, oh, I just saw a Coke ad. I'm running down to the grocery store. I'm going to buy Coca-Cola. It's brand marketing. It is awareness marketing. They're hoping that you see this ad, and the next time you're in the grocery store, Coca-Cola will be top of mind and you'll buy that, right? Direct marketing is different. Direct marketing is that email that says, here, click here to buy these blue shoes. come to our store, do this thing, where there is a direct call to action, direct marketing, right? Both are important, right? But if you measure brand marketing using direct marketing metrics, it will always fail, right? So brand marketing is content. That's the way I view delivering marketing joy. This podcast here, the Monday Minute, like podcasts that I'm on, that is brand marketing. It is creating top of mind awareness for me as a speaker, as a marketer, as whatever. And then as people join the list or they get around me, sometimes even on social media, I will throw a right hook in and say, okay, come to our event, join our mailing list, buy this special, do that thing. And I think both pieces are important, but I like to skew heavier on the give side so that when I do the ask, people aren't turned off. They're just like, yeah, well, he's in business. He's got to make money at some point.
Right.
And back to that rule of reciprocity, my hope is I've given so much value that they're like, well, I want to return the favor. And so that's sort of my philosophy on content.
Yeah. How have you gone about staying consistent? And because, dude, like I just heard like podcasts, like we threw out like 400 episodes right away, and you're on like you had the 500th anniversary of something recently, and then the podcast is, I mean, like that's a lot, dude. Like that is a lot.
Yeah, it's almost 10 years.
Dude, like that's okay. What can you say about consistency? I'll just go there. What can you say about consistency? Because I'll give you a platform to talk about that.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest mistake most people have. And P.S., this is where the overlap of fitness and content, right? That I always say that content, you'll notice that like somebody's gone to a conference and they are like, all right, that's it. I'm going to kill it on content. And they'll do it for about 2 weeks and then they like the whirlwind gets in the way, life gets in the way, and they lose that momentum. They stop doing it and it's all gone forever. It's the same thing with fitness, right? January 1st, this is it. I'm going to get 6-pack abs. I'm going to do P90X. I'm going to run a marathon. And what do they call it? I think it's January 9th. I think it is. Strava calls it Quitter's Friday. That's because people stop, right? And so I think that there's really magic in being willing to not be perfect, to show up every time knowing that every episode won't be your best episode, but you want to do the best with this episode that you can. And really, honestly, Andy, I get so many times where I'll be on a call with somebody and they'll be like, look, I feel like I've lost momentum. There's not as much engagement. There's, people, I feel like it's stale. What should I do? And my answer is always do one more episode. Do one more episode. So what I did was I set a date, and it was Wednesday, and for a certain period of time, it was like come hell or high water, I was going to have a show. And let me just tell you, it was really hard. There were times where I'm like, oh, I got to do a best of show because I don't have anybody lined up, or I'm going to do one on my own because I don't have a guest lined up or whatever. But I honored that for an extended period of time. And it was funny because just like anything else, it became habit. And then once you build those structures where you're like, okay, here's how you sign up to be a guest on my show. Here's where I come up with the questions. It took time for me to create that, but it is amazing the power in the compounding. And you mentioned the compounding earlier, is that I tell people all the time is they do a blog or they do a podcast or they do a video, whatever, and it's got 25 views, it's got 5 views, it's got whatever, and it can be disheartening because you're like, oh, I'm doing all this work and there's not that much return.
Feedback, yeah.
But one of the things I always say is it's not the same 25, right? So be encouraged that 5 of them are there every week. 10 of them maybe are there every week. Other than that, that's a new 15 every week are listening in different ways and different times. It's whatever. And when after a year, you will realize when you do a special episode or you hit a special thing, that all of a sudden you're like, oh, well, where did all these people come from? Well, they were listening. They just weren't liking. They weren't commenting. They were just quietly becoming a piece of your audience. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, well, that's momentum. And that will spur me to keep going. And then now it's like, I don't know. I'm at like episode 510 and I'm like, well, I don't want to stop now.
Yeah. Yeah, I know.
You know what I mean?
Becomes, it builds that identity. Like that's, that's James Clear saying like Atomic Habits is, you eventually reach a point where it's like, it's just what you do now,
Right.
like, but it's that friction of getting started and then trying to streamline it over time. And I mean, there's so many parallels to everything we've talked about today, whether it's content, marketing, fitness, just mindset in general. It's getting over that initial sort of hard thing and then just kind of accepting that as, a feature, not a bug.
Yeah.
And then, just making it work. And I think there's something to be said too about like finding the method of what you're doing to make it less painful in the short term, but still gets the end result. So like with weight loss, you can choose keto, time restriction, different workouts. Same with working out. It's like you can find, and with content, you can choose different pillars. You can be a podcaster, you can be a YouTuber, you can be a short form specialist, graphics,
Yeah,
And
you and I talk about Hormozy all the time, and he said the best diet is the one you will keep doing.
right,
That's
exactly.
that's the best one.
Yep. And the best content is the content you keep making.
Keep going. Yep.
So, it's really powerful, man. And I'm fired up. So, what are, I think what's something I like to end on a high note. So,
Okay.
What's something that's got you excited for, maybe it's your 90 goal. I know you're really locked in on the fitness right now, but what's something that's got you really excited in the short term that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I touched on it earlier, but I think it really is. I am excited that at 50, which sounded so old not that long ago, at 50, I am so excited about becoming a better version of me. So I'm reading more. I'm trying to be like, finance historically is the weakest part of me and my business. And I've suddenly taken over the finance of Hasseman Marketing because my wife's business is taken off and she didn't have time. So I want to get smarter at that. I want to get better. I'm literally pushing myself on sales, and I hadn't been doing sales. I'm pushing myself on fitness. I want to become a better golfer, whatever it is. It's like, I think I want to break down the myth that, that suddenly, well, what are you going to do? You're 50, like I want to be like, okay, I want to make this the best year ever. And that actually gets me really excited because I do feel better right now. I feel like my habits are better. I feel like I'm getting stronger. And so seeing the work pay off has got me pretty fired up. So that's probably the thing I'm most excited about.
Dude, that's awesome, dude. That's genuinely like really awesome to hear. Because I mean, that's what people, and even like me, like I see like the Ohio State players, like, oh man, they're all like 3 years younger than me now. I mean, the guy that just won the Olympics is like, so I mean, no matter how old you are, that doesn't escape you. And for me to hear, I can cultivate the mindset to make years ahead of me count. It's just about putting myself out there, making the hard things happen, and just overcoming. But you can generate a state where you're generally have that zest for life and excited and making an impact every day. So yeah, man, I really appreciate that. Like I said, I want to be mindful of your time, but where can people go to learn more about you, learn all things Kirby? Obviously you have the podcast, the website, the book. Where can people go?
So a couple websites I'll give you. KirbyHasseman.com is probably the easiest. I've got content on there, I do coaching, stuff like that. And then my business, Hasseman Marketing. On both of them, it's HassemanMarketing.com. Go to the blog. So that's where you can see blogs. You can see Deliver Marketing Joy, Monday Minutes, podcasts. I've tried to make it in one place. And so that's a good place to kind of learn a little bit more about us and kind of reach out.